There are moments in life when everything crumbles in a matter of seconds. You wake up thinking you know your life, that you know the man lying beside you, that you've built something solid. And then, in the blink of an eye, you discover it was all a carefully staged lie. Margot Beaumont had everything: a brilliant career as a luxury brand consultant in Madrid, a 5-year marriage that everyone envied, a penthouse overlooking Retiro Park that represented years of sacrifice and success. She was the woman other women admired, elegant, accomplished, graceful, but on the morning of her 34th birthday, while organizing a surprise breakfast for her husband, she found something she was never meant to see. A message. Just one message left open on his laptop, carelessly abandoned on the marble kitchen island. And on that glowing screen, every certainty in Margot's life shattered like crystal against cold stone. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy, an elaborate farce, a humiliation meticulously planned for over 18 months. What did she do with that discovery? How does a woman go from devoted wife to unstoppable force in just one phone call? This is the story of how Margot Beaumont didn't just survive the worst betrayal of her life. She rose from the ashes like a phoenix, more powerful, more free, and infinitely stronger than she ever imagined possible. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's rebuilding yourself so magnificently that they become irrelevant. And sometimes all it takes is 30 minutes and the right phone call to change absolutely everything. The golden Madrid morning light flooded through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Margot's penthouse, painting everything in warm, honey tones that made the entire space feel like something out of an architectural magazine. It was March 15th, an ordinary Tuesday that began like hundreds of others, with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the distant hum of traffic along Calle de Alcalá, and the comforting sensation of waking up beside someone you believe you know completely. Margot Beaumont moved through the kitchen with the silent grace of someone who knew every inch of her own space. At 34, she was the embodiment of understated success. Dark auburn hair pulled into an effortless low ponytail, hazel eyes that caught the morning light, a beauty that came less from perfect features and more from an inner confidence cultivated over years of hard work. Her penthouse in the Salamanca district was a masterpiece of modern Spanish design. She'd personally overseen every detail when she purchased it 3 years ago with money from her most successful consulting contract. Original exposed brick walls contrasted with sleek, contemporary furniture. Enormous windows, framed in minimalist black steel, revealed terracotta rooftops stretching toward the horizon. It was the kind of space that appeared in Architectural Digest, yet somehow still felt warm, lived-in, human. "Coffee?" she asked, turning to find Leonardo still in bed, visible through the half-open bedroom door. He was sprawled on his stomach, face partially buried in the pillow, his broad shoulders barely covered by the white linen sheet. Leonardo Mavros, her husband of 5 years. Greek-Spanish, devastatingly handsome, a rising star architect with a portfolio that took him from Barcelona to Dubai, from London to São Paulo. Tall, with dark eyes that could be tender one moment and distant the next, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance, but that Margot had always interpreted as charisma. He had that way of making a woman feel like she was the only person in the universe when he chose to pay attention. In a bit," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "I have that meeting at 10 with the Castellana Tower developers." Margot smiled, returning her attention to the coffee. It was her birthday, 34 years, but she'd never made much fuss about dates. Leonardo would surely remember later, perhaps with flowers, perhaps with a last-minute reservation at that impossible-to-book restaurant in Chueca, or perhaps not. He'd been so busy lately, so many projects, so many trips, so much stress. She understood. After all, her own career as a luxury brand consultant also demanded flexibility, understanding. Patience. That's when she saw it. His laptop forgotten on the kitchen island, something unusual since Leonardo was obsessively careful with his equipment. The screen was still lit, pulsing with that blue glow indicating unread messages. Margot normally wouldn't look. She trusted him, respected his privacy, but something that morning, perhaps the angle of the light, perhaps the feminine instinct that sometimes knows things before the conscious mind, made her eyes land on the screen. And then she saw the words. "Amour, how much longer are we going to keep up this charade? It's been almost 18 months. When are you going to tell her?" Margot's heart stopped. Her fingers gripped the coffee cup so tightly she was surprised it didn't shatter. She blinked, expecting the words to disappear, to be a hallucination, a trick of the morning light. But they remained there, sharp, accusing, destroying. Below the most recent message, there were others. Dozens of them. Hundreds. 18 months of intimate conversations, of I love yous, of future plans, of complaints about her, about Margot, about how Leonardo was just waiting for the right moment, how he didn't want to hurt her, how he needed financial stability before asking for divorce. She doesn't suspect a thing. Last night she made that ridiculous paella, so proud of herself, and I had to pretend to care. I can't wait until we're together for real, without having to live this lie. Margot read the message. Then read it again, and once more. The words refused to change meaning. She doesn't suspect a thing. The date on the message, 4 days ago. The ridiculous paella was the one she'd spent hours perfecting, using the recipe from his grandmother in Valencia, because he'd mentioned missing authentic home cooking. She'd set the table with candles, played that flamenco fusion music he loved, worn the emerald green dress he said was his favorite, and he'd called it ridiculous. Margot kept scrolling, in a horrified trance. Photos, there were photos. Leonardo with another woman, young, dark-haired, with a dazzling smile and model-perfect features. Embracing in cafes Margot recognized, in their own bed when she was traveling for work, in hotels, in cities where Leonardo claimed to be at solo project meetings. The woman had a name, Valentina, interior designer, 26 years old. "She's so predictable," Leonardo had written. "Always waiting at home, always trying to please, always making that puppy dog face when I say I need to travel. Sometimes I feel bad, but then I remember she has the penthouse, her financial stability. She'll be fine." Margot felt nausea rise in her throat. The penthouse. He was talking about the penthouse that she had purchased with money from her own work, the penthouse that she had designed and furnished with her own taste, her own talent, her own sweat. The penthouse that was in her name alone, because Leonardo at the time was still building his career and couldn't contribute to the down payment. "When are you going to tell her?" this Valentina had asked again, 3 messages back. "Soon, amor. I just need to make sure the divorce is favorable. My lawyer is reviewing everything. She has more assets than I do, so I need to be strategic. But in a few months, we'll be free. I promise." Lawyer. Favorable divorce. Strategic. Margot set the coffee cup on the marble island with a soft click. Her hands didn't tremble. Her face remained completely neutral. On the outside, she looked like the same woman who'd woken up 20 minutes ago. Inside, something had broken so completely that she wondered if she'd ever be able to feel anything beyond the Arctic coldness that now occupied the space where her heart should be. "Margot, is the coffee ready?" Leonardo's voice came from the bedroom, casual, unconcerned. She closed the laptop gently, picked up his cup, that large grey ceramic mug he loved, filled it with coffee, added 2 spoons of sugar and a splash of milk, exactly how he liked it. "Yes, darling," she responded, and her voice sounded strangely normal, almost cheerful. "I'll bring it to you." She walked to the bedroom, handed him the cup with a smile. Leonardo accepted it without even looking at her, eyes already on his phone, probably responding to some message from Valentina, while the wife he considered predictable served him coffee. "Thanks, babe," he murmured, distracted. Margot returned to the kitchen, put on her grey blazer, grabbed her bag, checked that she had the documents for her morning meeting with the client who wanted brand consultation for their new luxury hotel chain. Everything normal, everything under control. "I'm heading out. I have that meeting at 9, she said, kissing the top of his head lightly. "See you tonight." Bye." Margot left the penthouse, descended the elevator slowly, her heels clicking against the polished floor, crossed the building's elegant lobby, passed through the glass doors, emerged onto Calle de Serrano, where morning Madrid buzzed with life, cafes opening their doors, pastelerias releasing the scent of fresh croissants, tourists snapping photos in front of designer boutiques. She walked 3 blocks, turned left onto a side street, and then, leaning against the stone wall of a 19th-century building, Margot Beaumont finally allowed her legs to give way. She slid to the ground, her expensive bag falling beside her, important documents scattering across the damp sidewalk. And for the first time in years, perhaps the first time since her father died when she was 25, Margot cried, not a delicate, contained cry. It was a deep, violent sob that shook her entire body. It was the sound of 5 years shattering. It was the noise of trust betrayed so profoundly that she wondered if she'd ever be able to trust anyone again. An elderly couple passed by her looking with concern. A woman asked in Spanish if she was okay, if she needed help. Margot waved them off, saying she was fine, that it was just a difficult moment. But she wasn't fine, and she knew it. After 15 minutes sitting there, trembling, with her face smudged with mascara and her heart broken into 1,000 pieces, Margot stood up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, collected her documents, straightened her blazer, took 3 deep breaths, and then she made a decision. Leonardo Mavros thought she was predictable, thought she'd be fine because she had financial stability, thought he could plan a strategic divorce behind her back while she made ridiculous paellas and waited at home like a puppy dog. He was about to discover that he had completely underestimated the woman he'd married. Margot opened her bag, pulled out her phone. She didn't call a friend. She didn't call her sister. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she'd hoped never to need: Cristina Vega Alonso, the most ruthless and expensive divorce attorney in all of Spain, the same one who'd completely destroyed 3 famous footballers in notorious divorce cases, who'd gotten her clients everything they deserved and more. But that wasn't the only call Margot made. The second call was to someone even more powerful, someone she'd met 2 years ago at a luxury brand conference in Monaco. Someone who'd given her his private number and said, "If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, call me." Javier Castellano, private investigator, former intelligence agent, the man who could find out anything about anyone within hours, the man who specialized in cases exactly like hers. "Javier, this is Margot Beaumont. I need your help. Today. Right now." His voice on the other end was calm, professional, but she could hear the shift in tone when he registered the urgency. "Tell me what you need. My husband is planning to divorce me. He has a lawyer. He's been having an affair for 18 months, and he thinks I don't know anything." Her voice was steady now, ice cold, controlled. "I need everything. Financial records, communication logs, proof of the affair, any hidden assets, everything about this woman, and I need his lawyer's name and strategy. Can you do that?" There was a pause. Then, "I can have a preliminary report to you by this afternoon. Full dossier within 72 hours. Are you at home?" "No, I'll text you an address, a cafe, discreet." "Understood. Margot, whatever you're planning, Do it smart, do it clean, and do it thoroughly. That's exactly what I intend to do. The third call was to her office. Carolina, it's Margot. Cancel my meetings for today. Family emergency. I'll be back tomorrow. She hung up before her assistant could ask questions. Margot stood there on that Madrid side street, the morning sun now fully risen, the city alive with people who had no idea their lives were about to change. She looked at her reflection in a shop window, mascara smudged, eyes red, blazer slightly wrinkled. But beneath the disheveled exterior, something new was emerging. Something cold, something calculating, something unstoppable. She opened her phone's camera, looked at herself, and took a photo. Not because she wanted to remember this moment, but because she wanted to remember exactly how she looked on the day she decided to stop being the woman who waited, who pleased, who made herself small for someone else's comfort. This was the last morning Margot Beaumont would ever cry over Leonardo Mavros. By 10:30 a.m., she was sitting in a private room at Café Gijon in Recoletos, one of Madrid's oldest and most discreet establishments. Cristina Vega Alonso arrived first, a woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a black Armani suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Margot Beaumont," Cristina said, extending her hand. "I've heard excellent things about your work. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." "Don't be sorry," Margot replied, her voice steady. "Be effective." Cristina smiled. It was the smile of a shark. "I like you already. Tell me everything." Margot laid it out methodically. The laptop, the messages, the photos, the timelines, the comments about being strategic about divorce, the mention of his lawyer reviewing things. Cristina took notes on an iPad, her expression never changing. "Do you have copies of these messages?" "I photographed everything before he woke up. Dates, times, full conversations going back 18 months. "Smart, very smart. And the penthouse?" "In my name only. Purchased with my own money 3 years ago." "Other assets?" "Joint bank account, but my income is substantially higher. I have separate investment accounts he doesn't know about. My business is solely mine. He's not involved in any capacity." "Children?" "No." "Perfect. That simplifies things considerably." Cristina looked up from her iPad. "Margot, I need you to be very clear about what you want from this. Revenge, justice, financial security, all of the above?" Margot didn't hesitate. "I want him to understand that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of his life. I want what's mine, every single thing. And I want to make absolutely certain he doesn't get a single euro he doesn't deserve." "Then here's what we're going to do." Cristina leaned forward. "First, you say nothing. You act completely normal. You smile, you cook dinner, you play the devoted wife for exactly as long as it takes us to build an ironclad case. Second, we file first. He thinks he's being strategic. We'll show him what strategy actually looks like." At precisely 11 Sartre a.m., Javier Castellano arrived, tall, 40-something, with the kind of unremarkable face that could blend into any crowd, exactly what you wanted in a private investigator. He carried a slim tablet and nothing else. He sat down, nodded politely to Cristina, and turned to Margot. "I made some preliminary calls. Leonardo Mavros is working with Raúl Mendoza. Decent lawyer, but not top tier. He filed initial consultation paperwork 3 weeks ago. The woman is Valentina Reyes, 26, interior designer, works for a firm in Chambéry. They've been seeing each other for 18 months, you're correct. They have an apartment together in Malasaña that he's been paying for." Margot felt something twist in her stomach. An apartment. He had an entire apartment with this woman. "She doesn't know he's still actively living with you," Javier continued. He told her you two have been separated for a year, living in different parts of the penthouse, barely speaking. She thinks the divorce is already in process. So he's lying to both of us, Margot said flatly. Exactly, and that gives us leverage. Javier swiped on his tablet. I'll have financial records by tonight. I'm particularly interested in whether he's been moving money. If he's planning a strategic divorce, he might be hiding assets. Find everything, Margot said. I don't care what it costs. Javier's expression softened slightly. Margot, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen women destroyed by men like him, but I've also seen women come out the other side, stronger than they ever imagined. You have something most of them didn't. You saw it coming early enough to prepare. That's going to make all the difference. How long? Margot asked. 72 hours for the full report, but I'll send updates every 12 hours. After they left, Margot sat alone in that private room for another hour. She ordered a café con leche she didn't drink. She stared at her phone, at the photo she'd taken of herself that morning, tear-stained, broken, vulnerable. Then she opened her camera again and took another photo. Same woman, same face, but different eyes. These eyes were hard, calculating, determined. She sent both photos to herself with a caption. Before and after I decided to stop being a victim. When Margot finally left Café Gijon, it was early afternoon. Madrid hummed with lunch crowds, with business people hurrying between meetings, with tourists photographing the Cibeles fountain. The city felt different somehow, sharper, more real, more hers. She didn't go home. Instead, she walked to Retiro Park, found a bench overlooking the Crystal Palace, and sat there for 3 hours. She watched families, couples, solitary joggers. She watched life continue around her while hers had been irrevocably altered, and she planned. By the time Margot returned to the penthouse at 7 p.m., she had transformed completely. She'd stopped at a pharmacy, bought makeup remover and new mascara. She'd fixed her appearance in a public restroom. She looked exactly like the woman who'd left that morning, put together, professional, calm. Leonardo was home, sprawled on the sofa, watching a football match. "Hey, babe," he said without looking up. "How was your day?" "Productive," Margot replied, setting her bag down. "Very productive. Yours?" "Good. The meeting went well. Looks like we might get the Castellana Tower project." "That's wonderful, darling." She walked to the kitchen, pulled out ingredients for dinner. "I thought I'd make that pasta carbonara you love." "Perfect. I'm starving." Margot cooked. She set the table. She poured wine. She sat across from Leonardo and smiled as he talked about his day, his projects, his ambitions. She asked interested questions. She laughed at his jokes. She was the perfect wife, and inside she felt absolutely nothing. After dinner, Leonardo's phone buzzed. Margot watched him check it, watched his expression shift subtly, softer, more tender. Valentina, no doubt. "I need to make a call," he said, standing. "Work thing." "Of course." He disappeared into his home office. Margot heard the low murmur of his voice, the intimate tone he used to use with her. She cleared the table, washed the dishes, wiped down the counters. When he emerged 30 minutes later, Margot was on the sofa, reading a design magazine. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just project stuff." He sat beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. "You know I love you, right?" Margot looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd shared her bed for 5 years, who'd made promises, who'd said vows, who'd held her when her father died, who was now systematically planning to betray her while pretending everything was fine. "I know," she said softly. "I love you too." He kissed her forehead. "I'm lucky to have you." "Yes," Margot thought, "you are, and you have no idea what you're about to lose." That night, lying in bed next to Leonardo, listening to him snore softly, Margot stared at the ceiling. The Madrid night filtered through the windows, casting shadows across the room. This penthouse that she'd built, this life that she'd created, this marriage that she'd believed in, all of it had been real only to her. But tomorrow was a new day, and in 72 hours, she'd have everything she needed. In a week, maybe two, Leonardo Mavros would discover what happens when you underestimate Margot Beaumont. She didn't sleep. She didn't need to. She was too busy planning exactly how to dismantle the life of the man who thought she was predictable, too trusting, too easy to fool. He was right about one thing: she would be fine. She'd be better than fine. She'd be free. The next 72 hours were the longest of Margot's life, and the most transformative. On the surface, nothing changed. She woke up each morning beside Leonardo, made coffee, went to work, came home, cooked dinner, smiled, laughed, played the role of devoted wife with an actress's precision. But underneath that carefully maintained facade, Margot Beaumont was methodically building a case that would change everything. Javier's first update came at midnight on day one. Margot was in the bathroom, door locked, water running to mask any sound, when her phone lit up with an encrypted message. Financial records obtained. Significant findings. He's been moving money for 6 months. Check your secure email. Margot opened the email on her phone, heart pounding. The attachment was a detailed spreadsheet, color-coded and annotated. Javier's work was meticulous. Leonardo had been siphoning money from their joint account, small amounts, irregular intervals, nothing that would trigger immediate suspicion. 500 euros here, 1,000 there. Over 6 months, it totaled nearly 30,000 euros. The money had been moved to an account in his name only, then partially transferred to cover rent on the Malasaña apartment he shared with Valentina. But that wasn't all. He'd also opened a credit card she didn't know about, maxed it out buying things for Valentina, jewelry, clothes, weekend trips to Barcelona and Sevilla. He'd been paying the minimum monthly payment from his separate account, but the debt was substantial. He's underwater financially, Javier's notes read. The architect position looks prestigious, but he's over-leveraged. That's why he needs the divorce to be strategic. He wants access to your assets. The penthouse alone is worth 1.2 million euros. If he could claim even partial ownership or get a settlement, it would save him. Margot read every word twice. The man sleeping in her bed wasn't just cheating on her. He was actively stealing from her to fund his affair while planning to take more in a divorce. She took screenshots, backed everything up to her private cloud, then deleted the email and returned to bed, where Leonardo was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that his wife now had documentary evidence of financial fraud. The second update came at noon on day 2, while Margot was in a strategy meeting with her consulting team. Her phone vibrated. She excused herself, stepped into an empty conference room, and opened Javier's message. Full surveillance report attached. You'll want to be sitting down for this. Margot sat, opened the file, and felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Javier had been following Leonardo and Valentina for 36 hours straight. The photos were damning. The two of them entering the Malasaña apartment together, Leonardo's arm around her waist, kissing on a street corner in Chueca. Having lunch at an outdoor cafe in La Latina, holding hands across the table like newlyweds. But the worst were the photos from inside the apartment, taken with a telephoto lens through the windows. The apartment that Leonardo had furnished, that he'd paid for with money taken from his life with Margot. There were photos of them cooking dinner together, laughing, of them on the sofa, Valentina's head on his shoulder. Of the bedroom, the same side of the bed Leonardo slept on at home, the same white sheets, as if he'd simply recreated his life with a younger, prettier replacement. The report included transcripts of conversations Javier had obtained through legal means, recordings from the cafe where they met, where they spoke loudly enough to be overheard. Valentina. When are you finally going to be done with her? It's been 2 years of promises. Leonardo. Soon, mi amor. My lawyer says we need to wait until the timing is right. She makes more money than I do, so it's complicated, but I'm working on it. Valentina. I'm tired of being the secret. I want to meet your friends. I want you to come to my family dinners without excuses. Leonardo. You will, I promise. Just a few more months and we'll be together properly. I'll move in here full-time and we'll forget she ever existed. Margot read the last line 3 times. We'll forget she ever existed. 5 years of marriage, 7 years together total, and to Leonardo, she was just an obstacle to forget. An inconvenience to maneuver around, a source of assets to strategically extract and then discard. She sat in that empty conference room for 20 minutes, staring at her phone, feeling the last remnants of whatever affection she'd once felt for Leonardo Mavros turn to ice. When she returned to her meeting, her colleague asked if everything was okay. Everything's perfect, Margot said with a smile. Just some personal business being resolved. Now where were we on the hotel branding strategy? That evening, Margot cooked Leonardo's favorite meal, her grandmother's recipe for cochinillo asado that took hours to prepare. She set the dining table with their wedding china. She wore the dress he'd once said made her look like a goddess. She lit candles. She smiled. Leonardo came home, saw the setup, and his face registered surprise. "What's all this?" he asked. "Nothing special," Margot said lightly. "I just wanted to do something nice for us. We've both been so busy lately. I feel like we haven't really connected." His expression shifted. Was that guilt? Discomfort? "That's really thoughtful, babe. You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "I wanted to." She poured him wine, served the meal, asked about his day. Leonardo talked about the Castellana Tower project, about a difficult client, about his frustrations with Spanish building codes. He ate the meal she'd spent hours preparing. He drank the wine. He accepted her attention as if it were his due. And Margot watched him with the detached fascination of a scientist observing a specimen. How had she never noticed how often he talked about himself, how rarely he asked about her day, how his compliments were always vague. "You look nice," rather than "that color brings out your eyes," as if he barely saw her anymore. "This is delicious," Leonardo said, reaching for seconds. "You should make this more often." "I used to make it all the time," Margot replied quietly. "When we first got married, remember?" "Did you?" He seemed genuinely confused. "I guess I forgot." "You forget a lot of things," Margot thought. "Like your vows, like your promises, like the fact that I'm a human being with feelings, not just a convenient source of stability and money." After dinner, Leonardo received a phone call. "Work emergency," he said, already standing. "I need to go to the studio, check on some blueprints. Might be late." "Of course," Margot said. "Do what you need to do." She watched him leave, saw how quickly he moved, how eager he was to escape. She checked her phone, a message from Javier. He just texted Valentina, meeting her at the apartment in 20 minutes. "Want photos?" Margot responded, "No, I have enough. Thank you." She spent the evening doing something she'd been avoiding for days, going through their shared photo albums. 7 years of pictures, their first date at that restaurant in Malasaña, the same neighborhood where he now had a secret apartment, their engagement on a beach in Malaga, their wedding in Barcelona, surrounded by family and friends, vacations in Morocco, Portugal, France, birthdays, anniversaries, ordinary Sunday mornings. In every photo, Margot was smiling, genuinely happy, looking at Leonardo with affection, with trust, with love. And in how many of those photos was Leonardo already planning his exit? At what point had he stopped loving her and started strategizing? Had there ever been a real moment, or had their entire relationship been just a transaction to him? Margot closed the albums and made herself tea. She sat on the sofa, their sofa, in their penthouse that wasn't really theirs because only her name was on the deed, and let herself feel the full weight of betrayal. Not the dramatic, acute pain of discovery, but something deeper, more pervasive, the realization that she'd been living a half-life, married to a man who was only half present, giving her whole heart to someone who was saving his for someone else. She could have drowned in that realization, could have let it crush her. Instead, Margot Beaumont felt something click into place, a clarity, a cold, diamond-hard resolution. Leonardo wanted to forget she ever existed. She'd make sure he never could. The final report from Javier arrived at 7 a.m. on day 3. Margot read it while Leonardo showered, her coffee growing cold as she absorbed page after page of meticulously documented evidence. Financial fraud, detailed records of money movement, adultery, photo evidence, location data, communication logs, hidden assets. Leonardo had a safety deposit box Margot didn't know about, probably containing valuables he was hiding for the divorce. Employment issues. He'd been fired from his previous firm for ethical violations involving client billing, something he'd never told Margot. Most damning of all, copies of the communications between Leonardo and his lawyer, Raul Mendoza, outlining a strategy to claim the penthouse had been purchased with marital funds. A lie. To argue that Margot's consulting business had benefited from his professional connections. Another lie. And to paint her as emotionally unstable to justify his affair, the biggest lie of all. The strategy email from Raul Mendoza to Leonardo included this paragraph. Given that the property is solely in her name, we'll need to establish that your contributions to the marriage were non-financial, but equally valuable. I recommend documenting instances of her emotional dependence on you, any mental health issues, substance use, or instability. If we can paint a picture of a woman who benefited from your stability while you received none of the financial rewards of her success, we can push for substantial compensation. Margot read it 3 times, her hands perfectly steady. They were going to claim she was emotionally unstable, that she'd used him, that she owed him. The man who'd stolen from her, cheated on her, and planned to betray her was going to argue that he was the victim. Ready for work? Leonardo emerged from the bedroom, adjusting his tie, looking handsome and professional. Almost, Margot said, closing her laptop. Leonardo, can I ask you something? Sure. What? Do you remember when we got married? What you said in your vows? He paused, looking uncomfortable. Of course, why? Just curious. What did you promise me? Leonardo's expression flickered. Annoyance, maybe suspicion. Margot, this is random. I promised to love you, honor you, all the standard things. Why are you asking? Just feeling nostalgic, I guess. She stood, smoothed her skirt. Sometimes I wonder if we still mean those things, or if they were just words we said because we were supposed to. Don't be dramatic, Leonardo said, an edge in his voice now. Of course I meant them. Good, Margot replied, meeting his eyes. I'd hate to think our marriage was built on lies. For a moment, something passed between them, a challenge, a question, a tension. Leonardo looked away first. I should get going, he said. Big day. Me too. Margot watched him leave, then immediately made 2 phone calls. First to Christina. I have everything, financial fraud, evidence of the affair, proof of his legal strategy. We need to meet today. Second, to her business partner, Alicia. I need to tell you something in confidence. And then I need your help with something important. By noon, Margot was sitting in Christina's office, a glass and steel tower in the financial district with views across Madrid. The lawyer spread the evidence across her massive desk like a general planning a battle. "This is—" Christina shook her head, a rare expression of surprise crossing her usually impassive face. "Margot, this is comprehensive. His lawyer is going to have no defense, none. What's the next step? We file tomorrow. We don't give him any warning. We don't give his lawyer time to prepare a counter-strategy. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we hit with everything." Christina pulled up a document on her computer. "I've drafted the initial filing. We're seeking full ownership confirmation of the penthouse, recovery of all stolen marital funds with interest, full disclosure of his assets, and punitive damages for fraud and emotional distress." "How much? If we play this right, you'll keep everything that's yours, recover the money he stole, and potentially get additional compensation. He'll be lucky if he walks away with his professional reputation intact." "I don't want to destroy him," Margot said quietly. "I just want him to understand that I'm not who he thought I was." Christina looked at her with something like respect. "The best revenge isn't destruction, it's indifference. We're going to make sure you can move on with your life without him ever being able to touch you again." That afternoon, Margot met with Alicia at their consulting firm's office. They'd been business partners for 3 years, building a successful luxury brand consultancy from nothing. Alicia was Spanish-Filipino, brilliant, fiercely loyal, and had suspected something was wrong with Margot's marriage for months. "Tell me everything," Alicia said, closing the office door. Margot did. All of it. The discovery, the affair, the stolen money, Leonardo's plans. Alicia listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder with each revelation. When Margot finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I never liked him," Alicia finally said. "I always thought he didn't appreciate what he had. But this is so much worse than I imagined. I need to make sure the business is protected," Margot said. "If he tries to claim he contributed to its success, I need documentation showing that it's entirely ours, that he had no involvement." "Already done." Alicia pulled out a thick folder. "I went through everything last night after you called. Every contract, every client acquisition, every financial record, your name or my name on everything. He's not even mentioned in any documentation, and I have emails from clients specifically praising your work, your insights. If his lawyer tries to claim credit, we'll bury him in evidence. Thank you. Don't thank me. You built this with your own talent and hard work. He was just background noise." Alicia leaned forward. "Margot, what do you need from me? Really? Because I'll do anything. I need you to be ready to testify, if it comes to that, and I need you to promise me something. Anything. When this is over, when the divorce is finalized, I'm going to be different. I don't know exactly how yet, but I know I won't be the same person I was. Promise me you'll still be my partner, no matter who I become." Alicia reached across the desk and squeezed Margot's hand. "You're going to become the woman you were always supposed to be, the one who wasn't spending half her energy keeping a mediocre man comfortable. And yes, I'll be your partner through all of it." That evening, Margot did something she'd been planning for 3 days. She went to a high-end salon in Salamanca, the kind where appointments took months to get, but could be expedited with the right connections and enough money. "I want to cut it all off," she told the stylist. "Something dramatic, something new." 3 hours later, Margot looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her long auburn hair was now a sleek, sophisticated bob that ended just below her jawline. Subtle highlights caught the light. It was elegant, powerful, completely different. "You look like a woman who means business," the stylist said approvingly. "Good," Margot replied. "That's exactly what I'm going for." She didn't go home immediately. Instead, she walked through Madrid as the sun set, watching the city transform into evening. She passed couples holding hands, families having dinner at outdoor restaurants, groups of friends laughing over wine, life continuing, ordinary and extraordinary. And she realized something. She wasn't sad anymore. The pain of betrayal was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Anticipation, excitement, the thrilling terror of standing at the edge of a new life. When Margot finally arrived home at 9 p.m., Leonardo was on the sofa, laptop open, probably video chatting with Valentina. He looked up as she entered, and his eyes widened. "Your hair." "Do you like it?" Margot asked, though she didn't care about his answer. "It's different. Why'd you cut it? I loved your long hair. I wanted to change." "You could have asked me first." Margot set down her bag and looked at him, really looked at him. "Leonardo, it's my hair. Why would I need your permission?" His expression darkened. "I didn't say permission. I just meant we're married. Couples usually discuss major changes." "Like having affairs?" Margot said pleasantly. "Or opening secret bank accounts? Or planning divorces? Those kinds of major changes that couples discuss?" The color drained from Leonardo's face. "What? Nothing," Margot said, walking toward the bedroom. "I'm just saying that apparently in our marriage, major changes happen without discussion all the time. I'm simply following your example." She left him sitting there, stunned, and closed the bedroom door behind her. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she'd make her move. Tonight, she'd sleep peacefully for the first time in days, knowing that she'd done everything right, built an ironclad case, and prepared for war. Leonardo Mavros thought he was the strategist. He was about to learn what real strategy looked like. The next morning, Margot woke up before dawn. Leonardo was still asleep, one arm thrown over his face, breathing deeply. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd shared her bed, her life, her dreams, and felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even disappointment anymore. Just a cold, clear certainty that today was the day everything changed. She got up quietly, showered, dressed in her most powerful outfit, a charcoal grey suit from Max Mara, emerald blouse that brought out her eyes, heels that added 3 inches to her height. She dried her new bob, applied makeup with precision, put on the diamond earrings her father had given her before he died. In the mirror, she saw a woman who looked nothing like the one who'd discovered her husband's betrayal 4 days ago. That woman had been broken, crying on a Madrid street corner, shattered by the revelation that her life was built on lies. This woman was armor-plated, ready for battle, unbreakable. Margot made coffee but didn't drink it. She was too focused, too wired with anticipation. At 7:30 a.m., her phone buzzed with a message from Christina. "Everything is filed. The court has the petition. His lawyer will be served papers within the hour. Are you ready?" Margot responded, "More than ready." At 8 a.m., she walked into the bedroom where Leonardo was just waking up. "I'm leaving early for a meeting," she said calmly. "There's coffee in the kitchen. I'll probably be late tonight." Leonardo mumbled something unintelligible, still half asleep. "Oh, and Leonardo." Margot paused at the door. "You should check your email today. I think you'll have some interesting correspondence." She left before he could ask questions. The morning air was crisp, Madrid waking up slowly. Margot walked to her favorite cafe near Retiro Park, not the fancy places where she usually met clients, but a small neighborhood spot where locals gathered. She ordered a café con leche and a tostada, sat at an outdoor table, and waited. At 8:47 a.m., her phone rang. Leonardo. She let it go to voicemail. At 8:52, he called again. Voicemail. At 8:56, a text. "Margot, what the fuck is this? Call me now." She blocked his number. At 9:15, a call from an unknown number. she answered. Margot Beaumont? A man's voice, professional but strained. Speaking. This is Raul Mendoza. I represent Leonardo Mavros. We need to talk immediately. This filing is... There must be some mistake. These accusations are... There's no mistake, Margot interrupted pleasantly. Everything in that filing is documented, evidenced, and true. If you'd like to discuss settlement terms, you can communicate with my attorney, Cristina Vega Alonso. I'm sure you know who she is. There was a pause. Cristina Vega Alonso is your attorney? Yes. Have a nice day, Mr. Mendoza. She hung up. At 9:30, her phone exploded with messages from Leonardo's number. He must have found a different phone. Dozens of texts, all variations of the same theme. How could you do this? We can work this out, just talk to me. You're overreacting. We need to discuss this like adults. This is insane. You're making a huge mistake. And finally, you're going to regret this. Margot screenshot that last one and sent it to Cristina with a note, adding to evidence, threatening language. At 10 a.m., she went to work like it was any normal Tuesday. Her team was in the middle of a major brand launch for a luxury watch company. She sat through meetings, made decisions, approved designs, was professional and focused. Her colleague Marina pulled her aside during a break. Margot, are you okay? You seem different. Good, different, but different. I'm better than okay, Margot said honestly. I'm finally dealing with something I should have dealt with a long time ago. At 1 p.m., Alicia knocked on her office door. You have visitors. They're insisting they need to see you. It's Leonardo and a woman. Margot felt her pulse quicken, but kept her voice steady. Send them away. Tell security I don't want him in the building. Already done. But Margot... Alicia hesitated. He's making a scene in the lobby, yelling about how you betrayed him, how you've ruined his life. Should I call the police? No. Let him make a scene. More witnesses to his behavior. But make sure someone is recording. 20 minutes later, Alicia returned with her phone. Got it all. He's screaming about how ungrateful you are, how he sacrificed for you, how you're stealing everything. The woman with him, I'm guessing Valentina, she looks mortified. I think she's starting to realize he's not the charming victim he portrayed himself as. Margot watched the video. Leonardo, red-faced, gesturing wildly in the elegant lobby of her consulting firm. Security guards approaching. Other people in the building stopping to watch, his professional reputation crumbling in real time. Send that to Cristina, Margot said, and send it to me. I want to keep it. At 3 p.m., Cristina called. Margot, we need to meet, now. His lawyer wants to negotiate. 90 minutes later, Margot was back in Cristina's office. The lawyer looked energized, almost gleeful. They folded, Cristina announced, completely. Raul Mendoza saw the evidence and told Leonardo he had no case, none. The financial fraud alone is enough to destroy him. Add in the affair, the documented lies, the threatening messages, and Leonardo's very public meltdown at your office this afternoon, which is now on social media, by the way. And he's legally and professionally finished unless he agrees to our terms. What are the terms? Margot asked. Cristina slid a document across the desk. Full and immediate divorce. He relinquishes any claim to the penthouse, the business, or any shared assets. He returns all stolen money with interest. He signs an NDA agreeing never to speak publicly about you or the marriage. In exchange, you won't press criminal charges for the financial fraud, and you won't seek additional punitive damages beyond recovery of your money. Margot read through the agreement. It was everything she'd wanted, more than she'd hoped for. When? He can sign today. Tomorrow at the latest. Margot, you're going to be free of him within a week. That evening, Margot finally returned home. The penthouse was dark, empty. Leonardo had clearly been there, drawers left open, clothes missing from the closet, his laptop and camera equipment gone. But he'd left most things, probably because legally he couldn't take anything that belonged to both of them without her permission. On the kitchen island there was a note. "I never thought you could be so cold, so cruel. I loved you, and this is how you repay me? By destroying everything we built? You've changed, Margot. You're not the woman I married. I hope you're happy with yourself." Margot read it once, then tore it into pieces and dropped them in the trash. "I'm not the woman you married because that woman didn't know who you really were," she thought. "I'm the woman I should have been all along. Someone who doesn't accept betrayal, who doesn't settle for half-truths, who knows her worth." She poured herself a glass of wine, a bottle of Rioja they'd been saving for a special occasion, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Madrid. The city stretched out before her, millions of lights in the gathering dusk, infinite possibilities. Her phone buzzed. A message from Christina. "He signed. It's over. Congratulations. You're free." Margot raised her wineglass to the city, to herself, to the future. "To being underestimated," she said aloud to the empty penthouse. "And to never letting that happen again." She drank, and for the first time in days, maybe the first time in years, Margot Beaumont smiled a smile that was entirely, authentically hers. The next few days passed in a surreal blur. Leonardo moved his remaining belongings out, while Margot was at work, communicating only through lawyers. She had the locks changed, updated her emergency contacts, removed him from her insurance and bank accounts, systematically erasing him from her life with the same cold efficiency he'd once planned to use on her. The penthouse felt different now, lighter somehow, as if his absence had removed a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. But Margot wasn't naive enough to think it was completely over. Leonardo's type never accepted defeat gracefully. The first volley came 3 days after he signed the divorce papers. A mutual friend, someone from his architecture circles, called Margot with concern in her voice. "Margot, I don't know how to tell you this, but Leonardo is saying terrible things about you. That you had an affair, that you stole money from him, that you're mentally unstable and vindictive. He's trying to ruin your reputation." "Let him try," Margot said calmly. "I have lawyers, evidence, and the truth on my side." "Do you believe what he's saying?" "Of course not. I just thought you should know." "I appreciate that. But please, if you hear him making these accusations, remind him that I have documentation of everything, including his written strategy to lie about my mental health. I'm happy to show anyone who asks the proof of who really lied and stole." Word spread quickly. Leonardo's smear campaign lasted less than a week before people started asking for evidence he couldn't provide. Meanwhile, Christina leaked just enough information to key people. Nothing specific, just hints that Margot had been wronged and had evidence to prove it. Madrid's professional community, while large, was also interconnected. People talked, and slowly the narrative shifted. Leonardo became the cautionary tale. The man who'd cheated on his talented wife, stolen from her, and then tried to destroy her reputation when she fought back. His architecture firm suffered. Clients became uncomfortable with him on projects. The Castellana Tower contract quietly went to a competitor. Margot watched it happen with neither satisfaction nor guilt. It was simply cause and effect, actions and consequences. But the real turning point came 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Margot was at a gallery opening in Chueca, a networking event for luxury brands and creative professionals. She'd almost skipped it, not yet ready for the social scrutiny. But Alicia had insisted. "You need to show everyone you're thriving," Alicia said, "that you're not hiding, not ashamed, not broken." So Margot went. She wore a black silk dress, her new bob perfectly styled, diamond earrings catching the light. She talked to clients, made connections, laughed at appropriate moments. And then she saw them. Leonardo and Valentina across the gallery. He'd clearly brought her as his date, perhaps trying to show that he'd moved on, that he was happy. But they didn't look happy. Valentina looked uncomfortable, constantly checking her phone. Leonardo looked diminished somehow, smaller, less confident. The charm that once seemed so irresistible now appearing forced and desperate. Their eyes met across the room. Leonardo's expression shifted through several emotions: anger, regret, something that might have been longing. Margot felt nothing. She didn't look away, didn't react. She simply held his gaze for a moment, then smoothly turned back to the conversation she'd been having with a potential client from London. It was the ultimate dismissal. Not anger, not pain, not even acknowledgement that he'd once been important. Just indifference. Later, Margot would learn that Valentina had broken up with Leonardo that night. That she'd discovered, through friends who'd heard the real story, that Leonardo had lied to her too, that he'd been living with Margot far longer than he'd claimed, that the divorce wasn't amicable, but rather the result of his fraud and infidelity. "I don't date liars," Valentina apparently told him, "and I definitely don't date men who trash their exes to make themselves look better." But that night, Margot didn't know any of that yet. She just knew that standing in that gallery, surrounded by successful people, wearing a dress that made her feel powerful, with a career she'd built entirely on her own merit, she felt more herself than she had in years. The woman who'd cried on a street corner 3 weeks ago seemed like a stranger now, someone from a past life, someone who'd been so afraid of being alone that she'd accepted less than she deserved. That woman was gone, and in her place was someone stronger, clearer, unafraid. At midnight, Margot returned to her penthouse. She kicked off her heels, poured herself water, stood at the windows looking out at Madrid, sleeping beneath the stars. Her phone buzzed. A message from Alicia. "You were magnificent tonight. He couldn't take his eyes off you, but you barely noticed him. That's how you win." Margot smiled. But Alicia was wrong about one thing. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about him at all anymore. It was about Margot finally, completely unapologetically becoming the woman she was always meant to be. And that woman, she was just getting started. 6 months after the divorce, Margot's life had transformed so completely that sometimes she'd catch her reflection and barely recognize herself. The penthouse had been redesigned. She'd hired a young designer from Barcelona to reimagine the space entirely. Gone were the neutral tones Leonardo had preferred, replaced with bold jewel colors, original art from emerging Spanish artists, furniture that reflected her taste alone. The bedroom had been completely reconfigured, facing a different direction, with new everything. It was no longer the space she'd shared with him. It was hers. But the external changes were nothing compared to the internal transformation. Margot had thrown herself into work with renewed focus. The consulting firm she shared with Alicia had landed 3 major contracts: a luxury hotel chain expansion across southern Spain, a rebrand for a historic Parisian perfume house, and most prestigiously, a consultation for a major fashion house preparing for Madrid Fashion Week. Her professional reputation had not only survived Leonardo's attempted smear campaign, it had strengthened. People respected how she'd handled the situation, privately, legally, with dignity and overwhelming evidence. She became known as someone who didn't just survive betrayal, but who'd strategically dismantled an attempt to destroy her. Several professional organizations asked her to speak about resilience in business, about maintaining focus during personal crises, about the importance of documentation and legal preparation. Margot accepted select invitations, not to trash Leonardo publicly, but to empower other women facing similar situations. The most important thing I learned, she told a room full of female entrepreneurs at a conference in Barcelona, is that the moment you discover betrayal, you have a choice. You can fall apart, and believe me, I did privately, or you can channel that pain into strategic action. Document everything, protect yourself legally, and never ever make decisions based on who you wish someone would be. Make decisions based on who they've shown you they actually are. The applause was thunderous. But it wasn't all work. Margot had also rediscovered parts of herself she'd neglected during the marriage. She'd started taking flamenco lessons, something she'd always wanted to do, but Leonardo had dismissed as touristy. She'd joined a book club that met monthly at a cafe in Malasaña, reading everything from Garcia Marquez to Sally Rooney. She'd started running in Retiro Park at dawn, watching the city wake up, feeling powerful and alive. She'd also started dating, casually, carefully. A curator from the Reina Sofia Museum who appreciated art and conversation. A fellow consultant from London who visited Madrid monthly. A university professor who taught literature and made her laugh. Nothing serious. Margot wasn't ready for serious, but she was ready to remember what it felt like to be desired by men who actually saw her, who appreciated her intelligence and strength, who didn't take her presence for granted. "You're glowing," Alicia said one afternoon as they reviewed quarterly reports. "I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Happy, genuinely happy. Not the performance of happiness you did with Leonardo. Real joy." Margot considered that. "I think I forgot what it felt like to live for myself, to make decisions based on what I wanted, not what someone else needed from me. It's," she searched for the word, "liberating." The consulting firm had grown too. They'd hired 3 new employees, were considering opening a secondary office in Barcelona, had been featured in Vogue España as "The Women Redefining Luxury Consulting in Spain." The article included a photo of Margot and Alicia, confident and powerful, with a quote from Margot that she'd thought carefully about before approving. "I believe in second chances for yourself. Every day is an opportunity to choose better, to build better, to be better. The key is making sure that improvement comes from within, not from trying to fix what someone else broke." It was the closest she came to publicly acknowledging the divorce, subtle, powerful, hers. Meanwhile, Leonardo's trajectory had gone in the opposite direction. The architectural contract he'd lost was just the beginning. His firm had let him go, quietly, professionally, but decisively. He'd been forced to go freelance, taking smaller projects, working twice as hard for half the prestige. Margot heard this through the professional grapevine, not because she sought information, but because Madrid's creative community was interconnected. She felt neither satisfaction nor pity, just a distant awareness that consequences existed, that actions mattered, that reality eventually caught up with everyone. She'd seen him once since the gallery opening. 3 months after the divorce, she'd been having lunch at an outdoor cafe in La Latina when he'd walked past with a new woman. Not Valentina, someone else. He'd seen Margot, started to approach, then seemed to think better of it. She'd simply nodded politely and returned to her conversation with a client, dismissing him as thoroughly as if he'd been a stranger. The real test came at a major industry event in June, a gala fundraiser for architectural preservation that both the consulting and architectural communities attended. Margot knew Leonardo would be there. She could have skipped it, could have avoided the potential awkwardness. Instead, she'd bought a dress that cost more than was reasonable, a midnight blue gown from a Spanish designer, elegant and devastating. She'd had her hair styled professionally, worn the diamond jewelry her father had left her, arrived with a confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she'd survived. The gala was at a historic palace in Madrid's center, hundreds of professionals mingling in rooms filled with centuries of history. Margot worked the room naturally, connecting with clients, making new contacts, genuinely enjoying the evening. And then, inevitably, she found herself face to face with Leonardo. He was alone, looking tired. The charm that once seemed effortless now appeared calculated, strained. His suit was nice, but not as nice as it used to be. He'd aged in 6 months more than he should have. "Margot," he said, "you look incredible." "Thank you." Her voice was pleasant, neutral. "How are you, Leonardo?" I'm getting by." He seemed to want to say more, struggled with it. "I've been wanting to talk to you. To apologize." "I don't." "There's no need," Margot interrupted gently but firmly. "We're divorced. We've both moved on. I hope things work out for you professionally." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" Margot met his eyes calmly. "What did you expect? You made your choices. I made mine. We're both living with the consequences. I wish you well, Leonardo. I genuinely do. But we have nothing more to discuss." "I didn't realize how much I was losing," he said, and there was real pain in his voice. "Not just the penthouse or the connections. You. I didn't realize what I had until you didn't have it anymore," Margot finished. "That's the thing about taking people for granted. By the time you realize their value, they've already realized yours." She excused herself before he could respond, moving smoothly into another conversation with a group of designers she'd been meaning to connect with. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't angry, it was simply final. Later that evening, standing on a balcony overlooking Madrid's illuminated streets, Alicia found her. "He couldn't stop watching you all night," Alicia said. "Looked like someone who'd finally realized he fumbled everything that mattered." "Good," Margot said simply. "Not because I want him to suffer, but because maybe he'll think twice before he treats the next woman like she's disposable." "Do you think you'll ever trust someone again? Let someone in?" Margot considered the question seriously. "Yes, but differently. I'll never again prioritize someone else's comfort over my own truth. I'll never again ignore red flags because I want to believe the best. I'll never again make myself smaller so someone else can feel bigger." "That's not cynicism, though. That's wisdom." "Exactly. I still believe in love. I still believe in partnership. I just believe in myself more." Dois, they stood there together, two women who'd built something magnificent from scratch, looking out at a city full of possibilities. And then Margot turned to Alicia with a smile and said, "You know what? If you're finding strength in this story like I found in living it, show me you're here by liking this video. And if you want to see more stories about women who refused to stay down, who rebuilt themselves stronger, subscribe to the channel because there are so many more powerful stories coming. Because every woman deserves to know she's capable of resurrection." The gala continued below them, but up on that balcony, Margot Beaumont felt something she hadn't felt in years: complete, unshakable peace. The following week brought an unexpected opportunity. Margot received a call from Victoria Castellanos, the head of a major Spanish luxury conglomerate that owned hotels, restaurants, and fashion brands across Europe. "I've been following your work," Victoria said, without preamble. "Your firm's approach to brand consulting is exactly what we need. But more than that, I've been impressed by how you've handled your personal challenges with such grace and strength. I'm assembling an advisory board for our Women's Leadership Initiative. Would you be interested in joining? The position came with significant compensation, incredible networking opportunities, and a platform to influence how one of Spain's largest luxury groups approached women in leadership." "I'd be honored," Margot said. Excellent. There's one more thing. We're launching a new mentorship program. Established professionals guiding women who are rebuilding their lives after major setbacks. Divorce, career setbacks, financial challenges. Your story, while kept private in the details, has apparently inspired several women in our organization. Would you be willing to participate as a mentor? Margot thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, crying on a street corner, broken, terrified, and then she thought about the woman she'd become, stronger, wiser, free. Yes, she said, absolutely yes. The mentorship program launched in September. Margot was paired with 3 women, a marketing executive going through a difficult divorce, a young entrepreneur whose business partner had betrayed her, and a widow rebuilding her life after loss. She met with them monthly, individually, and as a group. She shared what she'd learned, not the specific details of her divorce, but the principles. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Don't make decisions based on fear. Surround yourself with people who see your value. Rebuild strategically, not emotionally. Give yourself permission to start over. The question isn't whether you can survive this, Margot told them at their first group meeting. It's who you choose to become because of it. Betrayal reveals truth. It destroys illusions, and once those illusions are gone, you have the opportunity to build something real, a life based on who you actually are, not who you were trying to be for someone else. One of the women, Carmen, was particularly struggling. Her husband had left her for someone younger, and she was spiraling into depression, convinced she'd never be valuable again. "He said I wasn't fun anymore," Carmen said, crying. "That I'd gotten boring, predictable. He made me feel like I was the problem." Margot felt a flash of recognition. Those were almost Leonardo's exact words about her in his messages. "Can I tell you something?" Margot said gently. "The moment someone makes you feel like you're too much or not enough, they're showing you that they're not the right person for you. Not because you need to change, but because they're not capable of appreciating who you are." Leonardo called me predictable. He called the meals I cooked for him ridiculous. He said I was boring, that I was too emotionally dependent, that I was the problem with our marriage. And for about 48 hours, I believed him. "What changed?" Carmen asked. I looked at the evidence. Not his words, evidence. My career was thriving. My friends valued me. My clients specifically requested me. My work was featured in international publications. The only person who thought I wasn't enough was the man who was lying, stealing, and cheating. And suddenly I realized his opinion of me said everything about him and nothing about me. Carmen wiped her tears. "So what did you do?" "I divorced him completely. Not just legally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I excised him from my life like you'd remove a tumor. And then I rebuilt everything based on what I actually valued, not what I thought I should value." "Did you hate him?" Margot considered that. "For a while, yes, but hatred takes energy, and I decided I'd rather spend that energy building something beautiful. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, and that's what I worked toward. Reaching a place where he simply didn't matter anymore." The women in her mentorship program began to transform. Carmen filed for divorce and started her own business. The entrepreneur partnered with new people and launched a successful app. The widow started dating again, carefully and hopefully. Watching them rebuild reminded Margot of her own journey, of how far she'd come from that morning in March when her world shattered, of how breaking could sometimes be the first step toward becoming whole. By October, Madrid Fashion Week arrived, and Margot's consulting firm had a major presence. They'd worked with 3 brands showing collections, and their work was featured in every major fashion publication. The night of the opening show, Margot stood backstage, watching models prepare, feeling the electricity of creative energy. This was success on her terms. Work she loved, with a partner she trusted, building something meaningful. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I saw the Fashion Week coverage. Your work is everywhere. I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say that, but I wanted you to know. Leonardo." Margot read it once, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say. That night, after the successful show, after the celebrations and the client dinners, Margot returned to her penthouse. She poured a glass of wine, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on her newly redesigned balcony under the Madrid stars. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, trusting, optimistic, committed to a marriage she thought was real. That woman had been good, kind, loyal, all positive qualities, but she'd also been naive, willing to ignore signs, more focused on preserving an illusion than facing reality. And she thought about who she was now. Still good, still kind, still loyal, but to herself first, stronger, wiser, unafraid to walk away from anything that diminished her. It had cost her a marriage, had given her some very dark nights, had required more strength than she knew she had. But it had also given her freedom, authenticity, a life entirely her own. And sitting there under the stars, with a career she loved and a future full of possibilities, Margot Beaumont realized something profound. Being underestimated, betrayed, and dismissed had been painful. But rising from those ashes, that had been the most powerful thing she'd ever done, and she wouldn't trade it for anything, not even for the illusion of that perfect marriage she'd once thought she had. Because this life, imperfect, uncertain, entirely hers, was real. And real was so much better than perfect ever could be. 1 year and 3 months after discovering Leonardo's betrayal, Margot received an invitation that would have been unthinkable 18 months earlier. Madrid's most prestigious business journal was hosting their annual Innovators Under 40 Gala, celebrating entrepreneurs and professionals who'd made significant impacts in their fields. Margot had been nominated in the consulting category, not just for her professional achievements, but for what the nomination letter called extraordinary resilience and leadership during personal challenges, transforming adversity into inspiration for countless women in business. The gala was black tie, held at the Royal Palace, attended by Madrid's elite. It was exactly the kind of event she'd once attended as Leonardo's wife, standing beside him, smiling politely while he networked and she played the supporting role. Now she'd been invited as the honoree. "You're going, obviously," Alicia said when Margot mentioned the nomination. "I don't know, it feels conspicuous, like it's drawing attention to the divorce." "It's not about the divorce, it's about what you built after. Margot, you've mentored 12 women this year. The firm's revenue has doubled. We've expanded to Barcelona. You've spoken at 3 major conferences. You've become someone that other women look to for strength. That's what this recognition is about." Margot knew Alicia was right, but there was still a hesitation, the lingering echo of the woman she'd been, who'd made herself smaller, who'd worried about taking up too much space. "Go," Alicia insisted. "Wear something spectacular. Bring a date if you want. And show everyone that the woman who Leonardo Mavros thought he could discard is thriving beyond his wildest imagination." So Margot went dress shopping with her sister Sophia, who'd flown in from Barcelona. "I want something powerful," Margot told the personal stylist at Loewe. "Not trying to prove anything, just embodying who I've become." They found it. A floor-length gown in deep emerald silk, elegant and sophisticated, with a neckline that suggested confidence without trying too hard. It was a dress that said, "I belong here," without needing to shout it. The night of the gala, Margot took her time getting ready, hair styled in soft waves, makeup highlighting rather than masking, jewelry her father had given her. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged not just unburned, but refined by it. She didn't bring a date. This wasn't about proving she'd moved on romantically. It was about proving she'd moved on completely, into a life where her worth wasn't tied to someone else's presence or approval. The royal palace was transformed into an elegant wonderland. Hundreds of successful professionals mingled in rooms that had witnessed centuries of Spanish history. Margot moved through the crowd with easy confidence, greeting clients, making new connections, genuinely enjoying herself. And then she saw him. Leonardo was there. Of course he was. Madrid's professional community was interconnected, and he was still an architect, even if diminished. He was with another woman, younger, pretty, hanging on his arm with an adoration Margot remembered wearing herself once. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything else faded. But this time, something was different. Looking at Leonardo, Margot felt nothing. No anger, no pain, not even satisfaction at how different their trajectories had become. Just a distant awareness that he'd once been important to her life, and now he simply wasn't. She nodded politely, the acknowledgement you'd give any professional acquaintance, and turned back to her conversation. Leonardo approached anyway. The woman on his arm looked uncertain, sensing tension she couldn't understand. "Margot," Leonardo said, "congratulations on the nomination. I heard your speech at the Barcelona conference. It was impressive." "Thank you. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about us. I've realized—" "Leonardo," Margot interrupted gently but firmly, "I appreciate that you're reflecting. Growth is good, but I'm not the person you need to share that with anymore. We're divorced. We've both moved on. I genuinely wish you well, but there's nothing left to resolve between us. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. Not just the practical things, but you, who you are. Your strength, your intelligence, you didn't lose those things. You never truly valued them, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant to appreciate everyone else, but I've moved on to a life where I'm surrounded by people who do value those qualities. I hope you find people who value what you have to offer, but we're finished having these conversations." She excused herself before he could respond, leaving him standing there with the young woman who was starting to look at him with new, questioning eyes. The award ceremony began at 9 p.m. 5 categories, speeches from each honoree. When Margot's name was called for the consulting category, the applause was enthusiastic. She walked to the stage, accepted the Crystal Award, and stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces. She'd prepared remarks, something professional and grateful. But standing there, seeing women in the audience who she knew were struggling through divorces, career setbacks, betrayals of their own, she decided to speak from her heart instead. "A year ago," Margot began, "I discovered that the life I thought I was living was largely an illusion. Someone I trusted had betrayed that trust in every way possible. And for about 48 hours, I believed what that person had told me about myself, that I was boring, predictable, too much or not enough, somehow the problem." The room was utterly silent. But then I made a choice. Instead of accepting that narrative, I decided to investigate whether it was actually true. I looked at the evidence. My career was thriving. My friends valued me. My clients specifically requested me. The only person who thought I wasn't enough was the person who was lying and stealing and destroying our relationship. She could see Leonardo in the back of the room, his face pale. And I realized something that changed everything. Someone else's inability to appreciate you says nothing about your value. It only reveals their limitations. So I decided to build a life where I was surrounded by people who could see me clearly, the real me, not some diminished version I'd learned to perform. Margot paused, looking directly at the women she knew were struggling. "If you take nothing else from my story, take this. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You are not obligated to diminish your light so someone else feels brighter. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to recognize it. And the moment you truly understand that, not just intellectually but in your bones, everything changes." The applause started softly, then built to something powerful. Women were standing, some were crying. The energy in the room had shifted from polite recognition to something deeper, more meaningful. "This award isn't just mine," Margot continued. "It belongs to every woman who's been told she's too much or not enough. Every woman who's been betrayed but chose to rebuild rather than break. Every woman who decided that surviving wasn't enough. She wanted to thrive. We do that together. We lift each other. We tell each other the truth. We remind each other of our value when the world tries to convince us we have none." She raised the Crystal Award. "To every woman who's rebuilding, you're not broken, you're becoming, and what you're becoming is magnificent." The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. After the ceremony, Margot was surrounded by women wanting to share their stories, to thank her, to tell her she'd given them courage. She stayed until midnight, talking to each person, really listening, offering what encouragement she could. When she finally left the palace, exhausted but fulfilled, she found her sister Sophia waiting. "That speech," Sophia said, "was everything. Mama would have been so proud." They walked through Madrid's night streets, 2 women who'd both known loss and betrayal, and had both chosen to rise. "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" Sophia asked. "Maybe. If I find someone who sees me clearly and loves what they see, someone who doesn't need me to be smaller so they can feel bigger, someone who's excited by my strength, not threatened by it. That person exists. I know, but I'm not waiting for them to make my life complete. I'm complete now. If someone extraordinary comes along who enhances what I've already built, beautiful. But I'm never again building my life around someone else's presence." They stopped at a late-night cafe in La Latina, ordered wine and tapas, talked about their mother, their father, their childhood, their dreams. "You've changed," Sophia observed, "not in a bad way. You've always been strong, but now you're unshakable, like you finally believe what everyone else already knew about you. I spent so long trying to be what Leonardo needed, what I thought society expected, what seemed safe and acceptable, and none of it was real. This," she gestured to herself, "this is real, imperfect, occasionally messy, still figuring things out, but authentic. That's all any of us can be." 3 months later, in February, Margot's consulting firm officially opened their Barcelona office. It was a major expansion, representing years of hard work and strategic planning. The launch party was elegant but personal. Clients, employees, friends who'd supported them through everything. Margot gave a brief speech, thanking everyone. Then Alicia pulled her aside. "There's someone here who wants to meet you," Alicia said with a mysterious smile. "A potential client, but also, just trust me." She led Margot to a quieter corner, where a man stood looking at the Barcelona skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. He turned as they approached, tall, maybe 40, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, dressed impeccably but not flashily. An aura of quiet confidence and genuine warmth. "Margot Beaumont," Alicia made introductions. "This is Javier Castellano." "Yes, that Javier Castellano, the investigator who helped you, but he's here tonight as a potential client. He's launching a security consulting firm for high-profile divorce cases and needs brand strategy." Javier extended his hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you properly, not over encrypted emails while you were planning your strategic divorce." Margot laughed. "I never properly thanked you. Your work was Comprehensive. Life-changing, really. You did the hard part. I just found the evidence. You had the courage to use it. They talked for 2 hours. About business initially, his new firm, her consulting approach. But the conversation evolved, becoming deeper, more personal. He told her about his divorce 5 years earlier, how it had been painful but ultimately freeing. She shared carefully edited pieces of her story. "I'm not looking for anything romantic," Margot said at one point, wanting to be clear. "I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being someone's wife." "I'm not either," Javier replied. "I'm focused on building my business. But I have to say, talking to someone who understands the complexity of divorce, who's not just survived but transformed, it's refreshing." They exchanged numbers, agreed to meet again to discuss his brand strategy, left it at that. But over the following months, professional meetings evolved into coffees, then dinners, then long walks through Barcelona and Madrid, talking about everything and nothing. Javier was different from anyone Margot had dated since the divorce. He didn't need her to be anything except herself, didn't try to fix her or save her, just appreciated who she was. "You're not like most women I meet," he said one evening as they walked along Madrid's riverfront. "How so?" "Most people are still trying to figure out who they are. Completely. You've done the work, faced the darkness, emerged on the other side. That's rare and valuable." "I had no choice," Margot said quietly. "It was transform or break. I chose transformation. That's what makes it powerful. You chose." They didn't rush into anything. Margot had learned that lesson too well. But slowly, carefully, with complete honesty, something began to grow between them. Not the desperate, all-consuming passion of youth. Something steadier, deeper, built on mutual respect, shared values, genuine appreciation for who the other person actually was. 6 months into knowing Javier, Margot realized something remarkable. She was happy, genuinely, authentically happy, not because she was with someone, but because she'd built a life she loved, and having Javier in it enhanced rather than completed it. "I don't need you," she told him one night as they sat on her balcony overlooking Madrid, "but I genuinely enjoy having you in my life. Is that terrible to say?" "It's the best thing you could say," Javier replied. "I don't want to be someone's missing piece. I want to be someone's chosen addition." "Then that's what you are." 2 years after discovering Leonardo's betrayal, Margot was invited to give a keynote speech at Spain's largest women's business conference. 2,000 attendees, broadcast live, the kind of platform she'd never imagined having. The topic, rebuilding after betrayal, from survival to success. Margot stood backstage, listening to her introduction, feeling remarkably calm. She'd lived this story. She knew what she wanted to say, not the specific details. Those remained private, but the truth underneath them. She walked on stage to thunderous applause. "I want to tell you about the worst and best day of my life," she began. "The worst day was when I discovered that someone I trusted had betrayed me completely. The best day was when I decided that betrayal didn't define me. It only revealed truth I'd been avoiding." For 30 minutes, Margot shared her journey, not as a victim, not as someone seeking sympathy, but as someone who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. She talked about the importance of documentation and legal preparation, about the power of having people in your corner who see your value, about the necessity of feeling your feelings rather than suppressing them, about the difference between bitterness and clarity. "Here's what I wish someone had told me," Margot said near the end. "When someone betrays you, steals from you, tries to diminish you, their goal is often to make you doubt yourself, to make you question your worth, your sanity, your value. Don't do their work for them. Instead, investigate whether their assessment is accurate. Look at evidence. Talk to people who know you well. Check the facts." She paused, making eye contact with women throughout the audience. "And I promise you, if you look at actual evidence rather than someone's manipulative narrative, you'll discover something powerful. You are so much stronger, more capable, and more valuable than the person who betrayed you ever wanted you to believe. Their inability to see your worth was always their limitation, not your deficit." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Afterward, in the speaker's lounge, an older woman approached Margot. Distinguished, elegant, clearly successful. "I'm Pilar Dominguez," she said. "CEO of Dominguez Industries. I wanted to thank you. 20 years ago, I went through something similar. A husband who betrayed me, who tried to take everything, but back then there were no women like you speaking about it publicly. I felt alone and ashamed. Your generation is changing that, making it possible for women to speak truth, to demand better, to refuse to accept betrayal as their fault." Margot hugged this stranger who somehow felt like a sister. "We stand on the shoulders of women like you, who survived when it was even harder, who built businesses and raised children and kept going despite everything. You made it possible for us to have these conversations." That night, Margot received hundreds of messages, women thanking her, sharing their stories, asking for advice, telling her she'd given them courage. And Margot realized something profound. Her pain had become purpose. Her betrayal had become a bridge. Her transformation had become a testimony that change was possible. This was the ultimate revenge on Leonardo's betrayal. Not destroying him, not making him suffer, but taking everything he'd tried to break in her and turning it into something beautiful that helped others. 3 years after the divorce, Margot was at the penthouse. Her penthouse, fully hers, filled with art and books and memories she'd chosen, when her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Margot Beaumont?" A woman's voice, uncertain. "Speaking. My name is Valentina Reyes. I was the woman your ex-husband was with. I need to talk to you, please." Margot's first instinct was to hang up. She owed this woman nothing, but curiosity won. "What do you want?" "To apologize, and to warn you that Leonardo is trying to rewrite history. He's telling people you were the problem, that you were controlling and vindictive. I know that's not true. I know because—" Her voice broke. "Because he did to me exactly what he did to you. And now I understand what you must have felt. He cheated on you. With his new girlfriend. For months. While telling me I was boring, that I'd changed, that I wasn't fun anymore. The same words he used about you to me when we were together." Margot felt a strange compassion for this woman she'd once seen as an enemy. They'd both been victims of the same man's patterns, the same manipulations. "Valentina, I'm not angry at you. I was, initially. But I realized you were lied to just like I was. He made us both into characters in his narrative rather than real people. That's on him, not us. I should have listened when people tried to tell me the truth about what happened with you two. I thought I was different, special, that he'd really loved me. He probably believed he did, in his way. But Leonardo's way of loving is about what someone can do for him, not about genuinely seeing and valuing them. That's not love, that's transaction. How did you get past it? How did you stop feeling like you were the problem?" Margot thought carefully about her answer. "I looked at evidence instead of believing his narrative. I surrounded myself with people who knew my actual value. I rebuilt my life based on who I actually am, not who he needed me to be. And eventually, not immediately, but eventually, I reached a place where his opinion of me mattered less than my own understanding of myself. I don't know if I can do that. You can. It just takes time, and it requires refusing to let someone else define your worth. Valentina, you're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Don't waste it on someone who sees you as supporting cast in his story rather than the hero of your own. They talked for another 30 minutes. By the end, Valentina was crying, but it was the cathartic crying of someone finally facing truth. "Thank you," she said, "for not hating me, for treating me like a person rather than, I don't know, competition or something. We were never competing," Margot said gently. "We were both just trying to love someone who wasn't capable of loving us back the way we deserved. That's not competition. That's just sad. I hope you find someone who sees you clearly and loves what they see." After hanging up, Margot sat on her balcony, thinking about how far she'd come, from the woman crying on a street corner to someone who could offer compassion to her ex-husband's mistress, from devastation to wisdom, from broken to unbreakable. Javier arrived an hour later with dinner from her favorite restaurant. They ate on the balcony, talking about their days, laughing at stupid jokes, existing in that comfortable companionship that came from really knowing each other. "You seem reflective tonight," Javier observed. "Valentina called. Leonardo's ex-girlfriend after me. Apparently he did to her exactly what he did to me. His pattern continuing. Exactly. And I realized something. I spent so long thinking I'd been specifically targeted, specially wronged, but he just does this, to everyone. It was never personal. It was always just who he is. Does that make it easier?" "Surprisingly, yes, because it means nothing I did or didn't do would have changed anything. He was always going to betray whoever was with him. I just happened to be the person there when his pattern played out. That's not about my value or my worth. It's about his character." But they sat in comfortable silence, watching Madrid's lights twinkle in the darkness. "I'm proud of you," Javier said quietly, "for everything you've built, for who you've become." "Thank you for seeing me clearly," Margot replied, "for not needing me to be anything except myself. That's the only version of you I want." Later, after Javier left, Margot did something she'd been avoiding for 3 years. She pulled out the old photo albums, the ones from her marriage to Leonardo. And she looked through them, not with pain or anger, but with compassion for the woman she'd been. That woman had been doing her best with the information she had. She'd trusted genuinely, loved openly, tried hard. None of that was wrong or foolish. She'd just been investing in someone who wasn't worthy of the investment, but that investment hadn't been wasted. It had taught her what she needed, what she deserved, what she would never accept again. Margot closed the albums and put them away. Not destroyed, but relegated to the past where they belonged. Part of her story, but not her present, not her future. And then she opened her laptop and wrote an email to the mentorship program she'd started, with resources, encouragement, a reminder that every woman struggling through betrayal right now would eventually reach the other side stronger than she'd been before. The email ended, "You're not broken, you're breaking free. There's a difference. And on the other side of that freedom is a life more authentic, more powerful, and more yours than anything you've known before. Keep going. We're all here, we've all walked this path, and we're all waiting to welcome you into the woman you're becoming." She hit send, then shut her laptop, turned off the lights, stood at her window looking at Madrid, this city that had witnessed her devastation and her resurrection. And Margot Beaumont smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real, and real, messy, imperfect, uncertain, constantly evolving, was so much better than the illusion of perfection ever could be. She was free, completely, utterly, magnificently free. And that freedom, that was worth everything she'd survived to claim it.